Welcome back. You're with us for Reformed Thinking.
And today we are doing a deep dive into, well, one of the most curious and brilliant books in the Old Testament.
The Book of Esther. We're going to be working through a selection of sources, mainly drawing from Thomas R. Schreiner's analysis in his biblical theology.
And it's a great lens for this book because Esther is often just read as this, dramatic court story, a real page-turner.
Which it is.
Which it absolutely is, but the theological substance there is immense.
And that gets to our mission for this deep dive. We want to pull out those critical insights, some of the surprising details, and really focus on the central paradox of Esther.
Which is?
How does a book, one that our source describes as a truly delightful narrative, communicate God's total rule, his sovereignty, when his name isn't even in the text? Not once.
Yeah, that's the big question. It's a study in providence that is just unlike anything else. And Schreiner sets the stage for us right away. The main theme, he says, is that Esther is a detailed account of God's sovereign work.
Specifically to preserve the Jewish people.
To preserve them from annihilation. It affirms that Yahweh reigns over his people, that he keeps them even when they're scattered across a pagan empire.
And under the thumb of a ruler like King Ahasuerus.
Exactly. This is happening around the mid-5th century BC. So the core truth here isn't just about survival, it's about active providential preservation against all the political and military odds.
So let's start with what you call the central paradox, what we're calling the paradox of silence. This is where all the theology is communicated through the story itself, not through direct statements.
Right. And we should probably get this out of the way first. The sources acknowledge that Esther, for all its, satisfying plot twists, can be a bit jarring for a modern reader.
The ending in particular.
Yes, the ending can come across as vengeful or maybe unforgiving. We'll get back to that. But before any of that, we have to deal with the most striking feature of the book.
The complete absence of God's name.
The deliberate, sustained omission. It's stunning when you think about it. This is scripture. It's the story of God's covenant people. And the word God is never used. Yahweh is nowhere.
And the sources are clear. This isn't an oversight.
No, this is intentional. It's a studied literary silence from the narrator.
So when you look elsewhere in the Bible, God is visible. He's audible.
Of course. He speaks from a burning bush. He shows up as a pillar of cloud and fire. He gives dreams to Joseph, to Pharaoh. He sends prophets who say, "Thus says the Lord."
But not here, not in Esther, even when the people are fasting and mourning.
Which in any other biblical context would be explicitly tied to prayer and crying out to God.
Right. But here, the author deliberately stays silent about who they're praying to.
He's making a conscious theological decision. No recording the prayers, no miracles, no prophetic interpretations. It almost forces you, the reader, to supply the name. You have to identify the source of their deliverance yourself because you're not going to be told.
The silence becomes its own kind of statement about God's control.
That's the core message the source material pulls from this. I'll just sort of paraphrase it. God is present even when he seems most absent. When there are no miracles, no dreams, no charismatic leaders, no prophets, not even any explicit God talk.
And he is present as deliverer.
That's the key. The book is teaching us where to find God's action. It's not always in the spectacular. Sometimes it's in the quiet, political, even bureaucratic details of life.
So God's sovereignty is working just as effectively, even when his people are far from the promised land, sort of assimilated into this pagan culture, and there are no obvious divine signposts.
And this hidden sovereignty, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. The sources place Esther directly in the larger canonical story of the Seed War.
Back to Genesis 3:15.
All the way back. The conflict between the offspring of the serpent and the offspring of the woman. That's the cosmic backdrop for the political drama playing out in the Persian court.
So this isn't just about court intrigue.
Not at all. The enemies of Israel, personified here by Haman, are trying to wipe out God's covenant people. But the covenant promise itself says that can't happen.
And so God steps in, but not with, fire from heaven.
No, he steps in through subtle human means. He frustrates the plan to destroy his people, and he makes sure that the serpent's offspring are crushed by the very people they were trying to eliminate.
And within that big story, Esther and Mordecai have a specific role to play.
A role we've seen before. They function like Joseph or Moses.
How so?
Well, Joseph is placed in Pharaoh's court to save his family from famine. Moses is placed in Pharaoh's household to save the nation from slavery.
And Esther is placed in King Ahasuerus' court to save the nation from genocide.
Exactly. They are the Lord's chosen instruments for rescue, used in situations that, from a human standpoint, looked completely hopeless.
So understanding that big biblical story is key. The fight between Haman and Mordecai is an echo of Genesis. It tells us to look for the subtle work of God, which starts with, of all things, a party getting out of hand.
Which brings us to the actual narrative, the unobtrusive setup in the first couple of chapters. This is where God starts moving the pieces on the board, and none of the players even notice.
The story kicks off not with a prayer meeting, but with a messy, very human situation.
Queen Vashti's demotion. King Ahasuerus is throwing this incredibly lavish, month-long banquet. He's drunk. And he commands Queen Vashti to come and display her beauty for his guests.
And she says no.
She refuses. The king flies into a rage, and his advisors panic about the social precedent this will set. So she's removed. She's out.
What's so interesting to me is the narrator's tone here. The sources point out that the author doesn't moralize at all.
Not one bit. He doesn't praise Vashti for her courage or condemn the king for his ego. It's just reported as a fact. This happened.
That neutrality has to be deliberate.
Oh, it is. If the story was about human morality, the narrator would have offered some commentary. But instead, all the messiness of the pagan court, the drinking, the entitlement, the defiance, it's all just treated as sort of necessary gears in the machine of history.
This random social snub and the king's overreaction.
That's the event God uses, secretly and unobtrusively, to create a job opening for a queen. An opening that Esther, a Jew, is going to fill.
It's the definition of hidden providence. God doesn't need a righteous king to do his will. He can use a pagan king's ego and Vashti's defiance just as easily.
And the process of replacing her is just as quiet. Esther, her Hebrew name is Hadassah, is chosen after this long, year-long beauty preparation. It's basically a royal beauty pageant.
And her placement is everything. It puts her in the one position in the entire empire that can actually advocate for the Jews when the time comes.
Now, at Mordecai's instruction, she keeps her Jewish identity hidden, and the source suggests this isn't just about her ethnicity. It's likely that she wasn't disclosing that she worshipped Yahweh. She outwardly conforms.
Which creates a bit of tension for the reader, doesn't it? Is she compromising too much?
It does, but the author makes sure to stress her Jewish identity twice in these opening chapters. He's establishing that this hidden identity is actually central to the plot. It foreshadows the conflict to come, where her allegiance will have to be revealed.
And then we get the second, seemingly minor detail at the end of chapter 2.
The one that turns out to be the hinge for the whole first half of the book.
Right. Mordecai is at the king's gate, and he overhears two officials plotting to kill Ahasuerus. He reports it through Esther, and the plot is stopped.
And here's the detail you have to circle. The incident was duly recorded in the king's records. It's just a piece of administrative housekeeping. The king is saved, the traitors are dealt with, the story moves on.
But in a story this tightly written, there are no throwaway lines.
None. The narrator is teaching us how to see God's hand. Even the most forgettable action, a court scribe writing an entry in a logbook, is part of the plan. That record, which is going to be forgotten for a while, is a time bomb set by Providence.
A time bomb waiting to go off at the moment of highest tension.
We are being trained to see the machinery of sovereignty. These two disconnected events, Vashti getting fired and a minor assassination plot being recorded, are the absolute preconditions for everything that follows.
No Vashti's refusal, no Queen Esther.
And without that record of Mordecai's loyalty, Haman's plan can't be stopped in the way that it is.
This careful setup prepares the stage for the ascent of the enemy. The antagonist finally arrives, and the stakes become terrifyingly clear.
Right, the opposition enters the story, and it's the person of Haman. And the narrator makes sure we understand Haman is not just some random court official with a grudge.
He's identified as Haman the Agagite.
And that name is just packed with biblical history. If you're a learner, you need to get why that single word is so significant. Haman is a descendant of Agag.
The king of the Amalekites.
The Amalekites. If you trace that line back, you get to Exodus 17. They attacked Israel in the wilderness when they were weak and vulnerable. They became Israel's perpetual enemy, marked for destruction in Deuteronomy.
And the sources also point us to 1 Samuel 15.
Yes. King Saul lost his kingdom precisely because he failed God's command to utterly destroy Agag and the Amalekites.
So when Haman shows up, he's not just a new villain. He represents the return of Israel's oldest, most cursed enemy. He carries the weight of that ancient conflict.
His hatred is not just personal pride, it's historical, it's cosmic. and he gets promoted to this high position, and he loves the power, demanding that everyone bow to him.
But Mordecai refuses. He won't bow down or pay homage.
And when he's asked why he's defying the king's command, his reason is simple.
Because he was a Jew.
And again, notice the silence of the text. He doesn't say, because I only worship Yahweh. He just says, I'm a Jew. The implication, which the narrator seems to support, is that his identity as a Jew is inseparable from his allegiance to Yahweh.
So bowing to Haman would be a form of idolatry.
It seems so. He's reserving that kind of kingly reverence for his true sovereign, for God alone. It's a quiet, subtle protest.
And Haman's reaction is anything but subtle. It confirms the spiritual nature of this fight.
His rage is so absolute that just killing Mordecai isn't enough. It escalates into a genocidal plot. He plans to exterminate all the Jews in the entire empire.
The scale is just breathtaking. He goes to the king, accuses the Jews of disloyalty, which is always a potent political charge.
And he offers a massive bribe to finance the whole operation, 10,000 talents of silver, an astronomical sum. It shows you the depth of his hatred for God's people.
And he even casts the lot, the pur, to determine the date for the massacre. He's now acting as the heir to Cain, to Pharaoh, to the whole line of the serpent's offspring.
He is trying to completely destroy the offspring of the woman, and by doing that, by cursing the covenant people, he guarantees that he himself will be cursed.
The narrative has now set up this collision between God's promise and the enemy's plot. The tension is at its absolute peak.
An official, irreversible royal decree has gone out. The entire Jewish people are marked for destruction.
And that brings us to the crucial turning point, where we see human choice and divine providence meet.
The first response from the Jewish people is what you'd expect: fasting and mourning throughout all the provinces.
And again, the author intentionally doesn't mention God.
Right, but we know what's happening. This fasting, this mourning, it's all part of a desperate collective cry for deliverance from their unseen God.
And the practical responsibility falls squarely on Esther. Mordecai is outside the king's gate in sackcloth, and he demands that she go to the king and intercede.
But she hesitates, and her hesitation is completely understandable. She lays out the brutal reality of the Persian court.
You don't just walk in on the king.
No. To go in uninvited meant the death penalty, unless the king held out his golden scepter. And she adds a key detail. She hasn't been summoned for 30 days.
Which implies she might not be in the king's highest favor at that moment.
It does. Her life is genuinely on the line. She has a comfortable, safe existence built on her silence. To act now is to risk everything.
And this is where Mordecai delivers the speech that is really the theological pivot for the entire book.
First, he reminds her that her position in the palace won't save her. Haman's plot is total. She can't be neutral in this. Then he says it. The line that reframes everything.
You were made queen for such as this.
And that phrase just lands like a thunderclap in the quiet of the book. It takes every random, messy detail, Vashti's defiance, the beauty contest, her hidden identity, and it reveals them as deliberate, calculated steps in God's plan.
Her being there is not an accident.
It's an appointment by a sovereign ruler who saw this moment coming from the very beginning.
It's the narrator winking at us. It's the closest the book comes to an outright theological statement.
It is. But then Mordecai's conviction goes even further. He tells her that if she refuses to act, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place.
That phrasing is so interesting. From another place.
It's so vague and so deliberately so. Why not just say God will save us? By using this mysterious phrase, the author forces you, the reader, to fill in the blank. Who is the only possible source of rescue for the covenant people?
The unseen, sovereign God.
Mordecai is certain of deliverance. That's not the question. The covenant promises will not fail. The only question is about Esther's responsibility. Will she be the instrument God uses in this moment of history?
And she steps up. She shows incredible courage.
She does. She asks all the Jews in Susa to join her in a 3-day fast, and then she gives herself completely over to God's will without ever naming him. She just says, if I perish, I perish.
It's a statement of total trust and allegiance, acted out in the face of death.
After the fast, she goes to the king. He holds out the scepter. Her life is spared. He offers her anything she wants. And she asks for a feast and invites Haman.
But she doesn't make her request at that first feast.
No. She delays. She asks us both to come back for a second feast the next day. And this delay, which seems maybe like a moment of hesitation,
it turns out to be the crucial piece of timing.
It's the final mechanism of providence in this section. That one-day postponement is exactly what's needed for all the other pieces to fall into place before Haman can spring his trap.
Which moves us into the reversal of fortune, the dramatic heart of the story. And it all hinges on one sleepless night.
Haman leaves that first feast just walking on air. He's so full of pride. He goes home to his wife and friends and just lists all his blessings, his wealth, his status, and this exclusive invitation from the queen. He's at the absolute peak.
But his joy is soured instantly.
Instantly. He sees Mordecai at the king's gate, and Mordecai still refuses to acknowledge him. And Haman, with all his power, just can't stand this one act of defiance.
It consumes him.
So his solution is immediate and arrogant. He has his servants build a gallows, a massive one, 50 cubits high. The plan is to go to the king first thing in the morning, accuse Mordecai, and have him hanged before the second feast even starts.
Everything is lined up for Haman's final victory.
The gallows are built, the time is set. It seems like it's all over for Mordecai.
And then the narrator drops what has to be the most understated pivotal line in the whole book.
On that night, the king could not sleep.
That's it. That's the whole thing.
It is. That one sentence contains the entire theme of hidden providence. God isn't mentioned, but this random case of royal insomnia is the event that turns history. Sleeplessness is the tool of salvation.
The king can't sleep, so he asks for something to be read to him. And of all things, they bring out the royal records.
The administrative logbook we talked about earlier, and they just happen to open it to the page describing how Mordecai saved the king's life from those conspirators.
The dusty, forgotten record, read aloud at the one precise moment it can save Mordecai's life from a gallows built for him that very night.
The timing is just perfect. Providence uses a mundane physical ailment and a bureaucratic document to deliver his people. The king realizes Mordecai was never rewarded for this act of loyalty.
And just then, who shows up in the court?
Haman. He's there to ask for permission to hang Mordecai on the gallows he just built.
The timing is incredible.
It's a spectacular collision. But the king speaks first. Before Haman can say a word, the king asks him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor?
And Haman, in his arrogance, can only think of one person.
Himself, of course. He assumes the honor is for him, so he lays out this huge public spectacle. Royal robes, the king's own horse, a parade through the city led by a top official proclaiming his honor.
And the reversal is just complete.
It is devastatingly absolute. The king tells Haman, great idea, go do all of that for Mordecai the Jew.
The man who built the gallows is now forced to lead his mortal enemy through the streets, shouting his praises.
The humiliation is total. Haman runs home, and even his wife and friends see the writing on the wall. They tell him if Mordecai is a Jew, you will not overcome him. You will surely fall before him.
Even they recognize the theological reality.
Yes, these pagans see it.
Yeah.
They understand that history isn't just about politics. There's an unseen hand protecting Israel, and you can't fight against it.
The reversal reaches its climax at the second feast.
Esther finally makes her plea. She reveals Haman's plot to destroy her and her people. The king is enraged to discover that Haman's plan targeted his own queen and the man who saved his life.
Haman is exposed as a traitor, and then one of the servants points out the brand new 50-cubit gallows in Haman's yard, built for Mordecai.
And the king's command is immediate. Hang Haman on it. The weapon he prepared for his enemy becomes the instrument of his own destruction. The reversal is complete.
This incredible turn then leads to the triumph and the final word, which deals with the aftermath of all this.
Haman is dead, but the problem isn't solved. The original decree, sealed with the king's ring, can't be revoked. That was the law of the Medes and Persians.
So it's another legal hurdle that Providence has to work around.
Right. So the king authorizes a counter edict. He can't stop the planned attack, but he can give the Jews official permission to fight back.
They were permitted to gather and defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate any armed force that might attack them.
And that's a key point. It's not a license for aggression, it's sanctioned, empire-wide self-defense. When the designated day arrived, the Jews were ready, and they were victorious over those who sought to destroy them.
The narrative also includes a fascinating detail that many people became Jews.
Yes, out of fear. And this shows that God's salvation wasn't seen as being limited by ethnicity. It was open to outsiders who chose to align with the covenant people. The protection of Yahweh was so obvious that joining the Jews seems like the only safe bet.
It points ahead to the blessing for all nations promised to Abraham.
It does. And the whole theme of reversal is cemented in the festival they establish, the festival of Purim.
Named after the Pur, the lot that Haman cast.
Exactly, the lot he cast to determine the day of their destruction. But those days were reversed into days of triumph and feasting. The fasts Esther called for have become feasts of salvation. Mourning turned into joy.
And the sources connect this directly back to Proverbs 16.33.
The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord.
Even apparent chance is under God's control.
That's what Purim is about. It reminds the people that God protected them through the ordinary, secular, even random events of life. He was able to reverse what was meant for their destruction, using something as simple as a king's bad night of sleep. Like Passover, it's a celebration of the preservation of God's chosen ones.
Now, we do need to circle back to the point we raised at the beginning. The sources note that modern readers can struggle with the violence at the end of the book. The killings can seem brutal.
It is a difficult passage, and it's helpful to go back to the canonical context. The narrator viewed this action as justified self-defense. It was the necessary outcome of an implacable conflict.
This wasn't a political disagreement. This was seen as total war.
It was. The conflict with Amalek, with the serpent's offspring, is presented as irreparable. From the narrator's point of view, the destruction of Haman and his allies was a required consequence of the covenant. To preserve Israel, the enemy seeking its total ruin had to be destroyed.
So if we pull all these threads together, what is the clear message of Esther, seen through this Reformed theological lens?
It's that even without his name being mentioned, Yahweh is king, and the Jews, scattered as they are his people.
And no plot to destroy them, no matter how clever or powerful, will ever work.
It can't, because Yahweh has made a covenant promise to Israel, and he will fulfill it using whatever means are at his disposal, even a drunken pagan king and a forgotten piece of paperwork.
The conflict with the serpent's offspring goes on, but they will not win.
No, the book is an assurance that they won't. It points forward to a time when the kingdom will come in its fullness, and the whole world will experience the blessing promised to Abraham, because God is ruling over and through all things.
We've seen how providence works through a queen's defiance, a forgotten file, a delay in a dinner party, a sleepless night. None of these are flashy miracles. They're just sovereignly guided human events.
And so for you, the listener, maybe you can think about the scale of this hidden rule. What seemingly ordinary, even mundane event in your life today, a canceled appointment, a random conversation, a traffic jam, what might you realize, only looking back, was the decisive working of God's hidden hand?
We invite you to consider where God might be present in your world, even when his action seems most quiet, and when the silence of your own circumstances might be forcing you to look beyond the surface.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.